Hi, welcome to another Small Business Pivots where we have special guests from around the world. And today, I think you might want to listen to this because we've had about 140 episodes now and we've never, ever talked about this topic. So before we get beginning, I want to share just that our guest today has had multi-millionaire businesses. He's been an entrepreneur for about 3 decades and on been recognized as a top Inc. 5,000 fastest growing company. So he's got some experience in the entrepreneur world. But our listeners know that no one can say their name or their business like the business owner. So I let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Rich Kahn, CEO and co-founder of Anura.io. Um, what can I say? I've always been a developer my whole life. In fact, I wrote my first game when I was 9 years old. I got published in Compute Gazette for those of us that are old enough to remember that when I was 12. Worked my way through college selling. So internet sales was like perfect for me. So
Wow.
here I am.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm glad there's people like you because, including myself, like I've mentioned earlier, I hadn't even heard of this. And you said you've been fighting it since about 2005, I thought you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this has been ongoing. And so it kind of needs to bring to the surface. We have talked about internet security and we've talked about IT security and, all those malwares and all that stuff, but not on the digital marketing side. So, is there any place you just want to start? Because we're all uneducated on this, so I'm sure there's some things that you really want our listeners to know first before we dive into the questions.
Well, let's paint a bullseye on how big this topic really is. Um, I use this story once in a while, and it's kind of interesting. Like I'm a Shark Tank fan. I'm love entrepreneurs, love ingenuity, love seeing different ideas that come and people are passionate about. I'm into that. And when I watch it every now and again, I'll hear someone say, this industry is a $3 billion industry. I just want a little slice of the pie. This is a $4 billion industry. And so just to give you a paint of the picture, the digital marketing industry right now, as of 2024, I don't have 2025 numbers yet because they haven't come out yet, but as of 2024, spent over $700 billion in digital marketing. It was the first year that digital marketing exceeded traditional marketing. So now that's the digital marketing space. If we're in digital, we're spending money there, right? So by our conservative estimates, and a lot of different companies agree with us, some say more, some say less, but our conservative estimates, 140 billion is stolen by ad fraud.
Wow.
So when I hear these Shark Tank stories and they're like, it's a $3 billion, this is $140 billion loss.
Wow.
And there's a way to solve it, and but you can't ignore it. Like there's no longer, I always tell people there's no longer a question of if you have fraud. It's a question of how much fraud do you have.
Hmm. Interesting. So for digital marketing, can you explain for the listeners, because a lot of small business owners, they're still not quite engaged in the capacity of digital marketing. So can we talk about what that includes first
Yeah.
overall?
Yeah. So digital marketing is anything where you spend money online. So it can be Google, Facebook. So all your search, all your social networks, programmatic, connected TV, affiliate marketing, email marketing. Um, I think that covers most of the major channels. So those areas, like, you know, especially with new entrepreneurs, when they first get started, they want to be found on Google, right? So they want to have that earned traffic, as you call it, which is like SEO. So they always do SEO, which is important, but it's a long tail process, right? It takes months to develop an SEO plan that actually starts bringing in dollars. So as most entrepreneurs, we're antsy and we want to get to the bottom line faster. We want to start growing faster. So we pay for advertisement. So Google is probably one of the go-to places. Google, Facebook are one of the go-to places that people will start their digital marketing journey. And there's fraud there, but it's the first place people turn to. As you get bigger, you start adding on different channels, maybe do an affiliate marketing channel where you let people go out and spend their marketing dollars to drive in business to you, and then you pay them based on the business they bring in. And then if you really start to get big, then you'll start looking at the programmatic connected TV eras where there's lots of opportunity to get in front of people, um, and a lot more fraud.
So basically anywhere that you're spending money on the digital side, not just like if you have a company page and you're posting or anything like that, or does that include any online presence?
Pretty much any online presence. I mean, we've tracked it down to an average. When we do traffic quality audits for our clients, right? Like before we engage in working together, we want to find out how big of a problem they have and does it financially make sense to work together. So what we do is a free traffic quality audit. And what we're looking to find out is how much fraud they have. And on average, we're catching 25% of their traffic is fraudulent on average.
Wow.
I mean, one in every $4 that they spend is being put in the center of a room and lit on fire, like just going nowhere. So our job is to find it, find out where they're getting their traffic, and then show them how using our software we can solve that problem.
So does that include like followers and stuff that come on your page and they start following you? Because I know a lot of business owners have asked me, like, some of these names don't even look real.
Stop paying for your followers.
I
I
love
mean,
that.
you know why? Because if you build a presence online, like you guys have, you got a podcast going and you put out good content, you build it, then the people will come, right? That's the old saying. Like you build a good product, put out good information. It takes time, but it'll eventually build out correctly. And again, entrepreneurs are antsy. They want things to happen quick. So they go to Fiverr and buy 10,000 followers on there, and they don't realize they're buying fraud.
Mm.
So stop buying your followers, earn them. If you earn them when it comes to followers, that's the right way to do it. You still get some fraud mixed in there because it's just part of the ecosystem, but it won't be the lion's share of it.
Well, let's talk about those followers real quick because I know a lot of business owners are automatically sold like, oh my gosh, I can't, I get these little onesies and twosie followers and I've got 10 this week and now I've got 25, but wow, I could sure use a few thousand. Is there anything out there that's legit when you're investing in someone getting you followers? Because I know I'm asked that all the time and I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't think so, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be advertising, it's going to be digital advertising. You just can't go buy followers, like because that's where people get in trouble, right? Because they're going generally to Fiverr and they're, for $10 they can buy 1,000 followers and they're like, that's the way to grow, and it's
Yeah.
not the way to grow. But you can do advertisements on other, like podcasts. Like you can advertise if they're YouTube channels, you can actually advertise on YouTube to show your ad, your creative, your ad unit in front of like audiences. So if you're doing, for small businesses and my target small businesses, if you post your stuff on YouTube, I can actually advertise specifically on your channel. When people look at your channel, and I know it's the right audience looking at your channel because you got a good following, and now they're going to see my advertisement. That's how you earn or advertise to drive in real followers. It's the best way I've seen. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of shortcuts. I mean, I've been in the space for 30 something years, so I guess I'm old school at this point. You can tell by the company name. I don't have isolvefraud.com. That seems to be like the mantra most people have is like their domain name spells out what they do because it's SEO credit. I come from an era when, domain names were nonsensical, like
Mm,
Google, Yahoo, Bing. Like they link back a little bit to the company, but it doesn't say we help you find information.com. Like it's
yeah.
so you can tell I'm old school by how I name my companies.
Wow. Interesting. So when you first got into this space, what were you doing then versus what you're doing now? And in other words, how has it evolved over time?
Oh my God. And we could talk all day about that, right? So let's paint the picture. From best research I could find, September 1st, 1991, the internet became publicly available. It's the first time everyone can connect to the internet. But it wasn't a point and click. There was no browser at the time. You had to be kind of a geek to know how to get around. It was all technical, it was all command line driven. I didn't get started until 93. Um, I was busy doing a lot of other things, and I learned about the connection because it wasn't really popular at the time. It was very like it was low key kind of deal. And once I learned about it, I was hooked. I'm like, you don't have to dial into people's modems anymore, and you don't have to do. I'm in. So I was so enthralled with the internet, and I'm not a writer. I started writing a newsletter, and what I did was I basically went around AOL news groups for those of you that remember those, and said, "Hey, I'm writing a newsletter talking about what's going on with this internet thing. If you're interested, just reply back with your email address. I'll add you to the newsletter and I'll send it out." And I think it was about 6 months it took me. I had over 20,000 opt-in subscribers. Like
Wow.
back then, that was crazy.
That, yeah.
So, and I had a lot of communication with my audience, and it was really cool. So I was just, I would just research, get my hands on magazines or whatever, get my hands on, and I would just write up articles. Like this is the newest thing. Oh wow, there's a great new resource over here. Like this is how you get to it. Like describing how the internet was coming along, and I was just doing it for fun. And then what started the business was somebody turned around and says, "Hey, I see you got over 20, you just announced you had over 20,000 subscribers to this newsletter. Could I advertise in there?" Aha, I can
Mm.
make money doing this. Why not?
Heck yeah.
So we went ahead and said, sure. And before long, I was making a couple $1,000s a week. Again, this was very, very part-time side hustle, I guess you would call it today. And it was just fun. It was just because I was enthralled with learning about the internet. And then I'd, spend a couple hours writing an article, and then I had a special way of mailing it out to different people and just started growing it that way. And then in 94, so this would have been October of 94, I believe, is when the first web browser came out. My first web browser was Netscape 0.93 Alpha.
I remember Netscape.
So this was an alpha version. This is before, I mean, this was just, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to make mass adoption because no longer do you have to be techie. You can just be the average person just clicking on things and getting you around. And shortly after that came out, I was hooked on that because I'm like, this is how you're going to get mass adoption. Somebody turned around and said, "Hey, what about you running a mall?" Because back then, when they first started, online shopping malls were like, they thought that was going to be like the holy grail at the time. So I sent out a newsletter and said, "Hey, the new thing is that these web malls that are coming out. I'm not sure how to build one yet, but I'm going to build one. And if you're interested, I'll build you a store, put the storefront in there, advertise you on the directory, and I'll host it for like 3 months for like 150 bucks, something minuscule." And I sent out the letter, and I got almost $10,000 in checks. And I was like, oh, so my wife's like, "What are you going to do?" I'm like, "I'm going to learn."
Heck yeah. Well, I'm gonna cash them first.
I'm going to cash the checks, and if they cash, I got to figure this out. So I took a week off from work. I read 2,000 pages over the weekend, built the entire mall and all 50 something stores or whatever it was at the time in like 3 days. I
Mm.
just worked. I don't think I went to sleep. I was just so excited about it. I was building it out. Some other newsletter wrote me up for having one of the first moving graphics on the internet, because I had this idea of First Street Mall, and my envision was, again, dating myself. If you guys ever watched Happy Days, in the opening credits, Al's Diner would have this neon sign rotating. And I'm like, if I could have the name of my company spinning, how cool would that be? And I figured out a way to do it, and I posted it, and I got written up for like one of the first motion graphics they saw. And it was fun. And, and then all of a sudden it started to grow. And that's kind of where really the start of my first multi-million dollar business started out.
Wow. And I think this is really important for our younger generation to understand how technology has evolved. Even my sons, who are 24 years and younger, they didn't understand IP address. And, they didn't understand how all this evolved. And now they're like, oh, wow, that makes now they can really use the internet the way it's supposed to be and not worry about as the fraud and stuff like most people that aren't aware of it. So I
Well,
appreciate,
I'll give you one step better in going that little evolution real quick.
yeah.
So before the internet came out, you used to have to dial into a computer system that was
Hmm.
running a modem. The line had to be available for you to connect, and then you would download what was called a bulletin board system. That was the early version of a website. And when the bulletin board came down, it was all basic text, but the text would come in just fast enough that you can read it as it was being downloaded from the server. That's how slow it was. And it wasn't rated in, it was called baud at the time, like 300 baud. You had a 300 baud modem, you were like, you were cranking, but it would just come fast enough that you can read it as it was populating the screen. Fast forward until probably 96, I had an ISP where I had 300 phone lines coming to my house, a T1 coming to the house, and we were the first company on the East Coast that I'm aware of that was able to download a meg in 10 minutes.
Oh my
One
goodness.
meg. And I had
Wow.
had a client that was like, I got to be able to see this. Like I want it for the speed. And we sat there and we timed it. It was like just under 10 minutes. And they're like, wow. Now it's like every little image you put up is got to be downloaded in like milliseconds. Otherwise you get pissed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's very interesting for our younger listeners to do some more research on that too. Because my son, he was like, "What? The web pages don't? That's not what they're reading." I'm like, "Nope, it's all text in the background. I mean, it's code and everything." And he didn't know all that. So this is very important to understand how people hack into websites and digital marketing with code. So, can we kind of jump into that part
Yeah.
now and explain how that all works?
So there's so many different ways of logging into stuff, but let's use Google as the example because they're probably, if not the biggest, one of the biggest, online marketing channels out there. So everybody knows Google.com, that's where they get the traffic from. But what people don't know is that Google gets most of the traffic that it sells to its clients from other websites, like a weather.com, CNN, where you go to these sites and they'll have banners or they'll have text units or they'll have different things on there. And a lot of the sites that they'll get traffic from are legitimate. They've been around for years, name brands, people know who they are. But then there's this whole underworld of sites that you've never seen before, right? And they're all about driving traffic. Like they'll buy traffic from other locations to drive to these landing pages to hopefully click on an ad and make money from Google. And anytime you pay somebody to do something on the internet, cheaters find a way to cheat. So that's how they cheat. So now, back in the day, we'll give you like a little bit of evolution of fraud. You know, let's say this was my website, right? I went and I clicked on an ad. I was like, "Ooh, I just made $2." Click again. Oh, I just made another $2. Well, if the click keeps coming from the same computer, same IP address, back in the day, that was allowed. Now it's not, right? So they check it. So now, how can you click on those ads without having to actually spend the money to drive the traffic or build up the following to click on those ads? So bots came out, right? Because I can run bots from all over the world to do a simple task. Come to the site, scroll down to a link, click on the link. And then that became, okay, now we can catch those. And then it evolved over time. So now you have AI that's making it look like, so now if I'm recording the screen, because a lot of people use screen recording captures, if I record the screen, the mouse movement looks real, the page scroll depth looks real, everything looks real, and it's not. And at the end of the day, it's clicking on a link, and they're able to bounce off of, this throw out a term there called residential proxy IPs. So basically people are able to bounce off your cable modem using your cable modem's IP address, so it looks like a legitimate IP address, and then perform some action. And because this is all software, you can run tens or hundreds of thousands of these bots simultaneously for next to nothing. It becomes so easy to commit the fraud.
Wow. Can you explain for the non-techies what an IP address is and how that actually works? I've had a discussion with business owners before, and I've shared with them, yes, everything is traceable now. Everything goes back, and they didn't understand how the IP works and what it is.
Okay, so an IP address is an Internet Protocol address. There are two versions, IPv4, which is basically, if you look at this number, they call it 4 octets separated by periods, and each octet goes from 0 to 255. If you do the math on that, that's about 2.1 billion unique combinations that you can generate using IPv4. I'll leave the IPv6 for another discussion because that gets, I think, a little too much into the weeds. Anyway, so every computer on the internet, in order to communicate with each other, so in other words, you log on to a computer, in order for your computer to be recognized on the internet, it needs an address. So it knows where to send and receive data from. So when you connect to your ISP, they assign you an IP address. And that IP address says, as for this session that you're connected to the internet, this is you. so that if somebody wants to get to you, they can just type that address in and the system knows how to route to your computer. But this is important because you go to google.com, right? You don't know the IP address of Google. Google.com goes to what's called a DNS server, a domain name service, and it looks up google.com, finds the appropriate IP address, almost like a phone number, and sends your computer, which you have your own IP address, to that Google IP address. And to you, it just says google.com, but behind the scenes, the computers are communicating over the IP address location. They know, okay, I'm sending a request to Google, search for restaurants in my area. And then Google says, okay, I got to send this information. How do I get it back? Oh, I know his IP address. Let me send it back to the IP address. And that IP address is used to communicate. So anytime you connect to the internet, you have an IP address. And at that point of time, if I log into Verizon, right, that's my ISP. If I log into Verizon and I'm giving an IP address, and just for simple sake, we'll call it 1.1.1.1, right? 4 octets separated by periods. Um, Verizon knows my username, my account information, everything I used to log in, and the time frame that I was currently using that IP address. So if I was to commit fraud of any kind, and somebody said, I have fraud being committed by 1.1.1.1, I can look it up. Oh, Verizon owns that. I can then subpoena Verizon for the records and find out, hey, it was Rich Kahn. So that becomes a problem. Everybody's trackable, everybody's traceable. This is how everybody works, right? Fraudsters know this. So they hide themselves. They bounce off of different IP addresses. So there's, without getting too technical, because like I said, the audience, I don't want to go, we're not a tech crowd here, so we'll keep it light. But I know a way where I can bounce off of, um, let's say, Michael's IP address. I can hack into his cable modem, bounce off his IP address, commit my fraud, and disappear, and nobody's going to find me because they think Michael committed fraud. So it becomes a bigger problem. But every IP address out there is traceable.
It's amazing how our conversation just keeps leading into explaining how this works. So, when you're in the world of finding fraud, explain what your company does and how it works.
Sure. So I have an example that I talk to people about when I try to explain it. So when you connect to a website, we have a piece of code that runs and scans your machine for over 800 data points. So I'm getting hardware, software, plugins, anything and everything that I can grab. I know how that data is supposed to look, how that data interacts with each other, and based on that information, I can give a real answer. So to give you a real world example, let's say I scanned your machine using a very basic filter. I looked at just the IP address and user agent. From that IP address, I can see, oh, that's owned by a Starbucks. So that's legitimate. You go to Starbucks, you can use their free Wi-Fi. I see the user agent tells me it's an iPhone 17 Pro, legitimate device. Everything looks good. I would normally say, hey, that's a good user. Our software comes in, scans that device, and says, wow, this iPhone has no touchscreen.
Hmm.
Every iPhone ever created has touchscreen. So we're looking at that level of detail, and I can say, wow, this claims to be an iPhone, has no touchscreen. What else can I find with the other 800 data points that this doesn't look right? And so if I get enough information confirming, I can say, this is fraudulent.
It's always interesting. Now, does this apply to anything that's recording numbers? In other words, like podcast. I've seen where people go, I was getting about 50 downloads, and then all of a sudden one day I got 580, and I don't know what's going on. So, are people using it across the board on the internet to these bots to just inflate numbers and mess
Yeah.
with people?
There's always a reason for it. I don't know all the reasons, right? I just know I can tell if it's a real person or not. And like I said, maybe that podcast was having a commercial air and somebody wanted to, spike up the numbers to make more. Usually it's not the podcaster, right? I believe the good in everybody. I'm sure there's some podcasters out there that are just jacking up their numbers just so they can sell more ads or whatever they're trying to accomplish. But generally speaking, I believe the good in people, and I believe that they're not trying to do anything wrong. It's just how they advertise. They may be advertising in a spot where, hey, if I advertise on this channel, they promise me I'm going to have more followers, and that channel might be laden with fraud, knowing that the end KPI, the key performance indicator, is to drive in more viewers. So that bot knows to, hey, I got to jack up the viewers to make it look like my marketing's working. And that's where the fraud comes in. And like, again, every channel, every place where fraud's involved could be for different purposes. Generally speaking, fraud is committed to make money in some fashion, whether it's direct or indirectly. And it's just a matter of knowing the channel really well and running through it with a mind of like a fraudster. Like, if I was going to try to defraud the system, why would I do it and how would I do it? And you can eventually come down to a point of, hey, this is what's going on.
So we introduce AI in this world of havoc. I would think that it's made it easier for hackers and harder for people like yourself, or maybe not true. What are
It's a
your thoughts?
combination of both because both sides have the same tool, right? Both sides have AI. So we get to use AI to help us, iterate our software faster. They get AI to iterate their software faster. I'll give you an example. In Q3 last year was one of the biggest AI assisted bot attacks I've ever seen. It hit a certain vertical. We had clients in and we saw it hit. It was so advanced, it took us 3 months to solve that issue. We had to revamp our entire process because we saw what they were doing. We knew how to solve it, but we had to rewrite our software to secure certain things and allow us to be um, protected and protect our clients for years to come. So rather than just doing a quick fix, this required a whole new rewrite of our entire software. So our team got together, worked night and day, and resolved the issue. And end of Q4, we rolled out this new update, and we're catching stuff that nobody's catching right now, which is awesome. So keeps us
Excellent.
ahead of the competition, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, this question may be subjective. So, do you feel like most people like yourself and other companies are doing their best and FBI, all these people that are trying to track these scammers, are they working just as hard trying to keep up with them, or are they actually trying to find them and persecute them, or is there just too many of them that we just want to try to keep people safe? We can't find them.
I I have a couple of competitors in this space, one or two in particular, where they're always trying to make an example, trying to find, I mean, really trying to find who's doing it and try to shut their operation down. And I kind of laughed at one of their findings. Like, they made this big deal about it. They were at some of the big shows talking about this new fraud find, and they were able to shut down $5 million a year in fraud. And I laughed. I said, it is a $140 billion problem. $5 million is a drop in the bucket. You shut them off. Whoever was funding them just opened up another shop, two doors down. And, so the biggest problem is we have very strong privacy laws in our country. Everything's about privacy. Everybody wants privacy. Nobody wants to be, but that also protects the fraudsters because the same laws that protect you and I, because we want to keep our privacy protected, protects them as well. So for us, we're a relatively small company, but we're beating some of the big companies in the industry with our technology. And we're able to do that because we're focused on one thing, solving the problem, keeping fraud off our clients' networks. Trying to chase down these people would take a lot more resources. And at the end of the day, what are you really stopping? Like, it's such a big problem. You're better off just protecting your clients so well that fraudsters try and try and try and then say, I give up, I'll go somewhere else. It's kind of like, I use the old saying, I think it's ADT had the commercial out, right? They had the commercial out where you put the sign on the property that says protected by ADT. And a burglar comes up and says, they're such a hard system. I'm just going to go next door. They don't have it.
Yeah.
Just they realize they got the protection. They don't even want to try. They just go to the next guy on the block.
Yeah, they've been talking about that in a neighborhood by my neighborhood where they're like, if you leave your doors unlocked, you are going to get things stolen out of your car. Most of the time, if it's locked, they're going to go to the next car that's not.
Yeah,
you know.
same
So,
thing.
yeah, great example, great example. Well, you've built some pretty massive companies here. Most of our listeners are probably doing less than 500,000 or so, and they're stuck. And so, any insights, advice of how you've gotten to that next level that would help our listeners as well?
Well, I'll give you a little story. I like stories. I a lot of the stuff that I've created over time, when I decided to launch it, and I'll just use Anura for example. We launched Anura as a state. We actually built Anura in 2005 when nothing existed because I knew what the problem was. I had seen fraud before in the past. And I remember saying, look, I just want to license a fraud solution, bolt it onto my platform, and just go about my business. And in 2005, nothing existed because the first commercially available fraud solution didn't come out until late 2008, 2009. So I had no choice. I built it myself, and then it was working great for us. We're just cranking along, doing our thing. And then I had the bright idea, we got a lot of people asking to use this software outside of our network. We should maybe consider that. So in long story short, we launched it in 2017. Meanwhile, the first one came out almost 10 years prior. Wasn't new. And we did some testing to find out that we felt we had a stronger solution, was finding more stuff more accurately. And we did lots of tests. I spent six figures of my own money testing to just to make sure it was right before I took out a second mortgage on my house to go build up another platform. So you do all this work and you look at it and it's like, okay, what made me successful? So you know what? We launched this product. We're like, this is a great product, but it doesn't sell itself, right? Nothing sells itself. You got to get out there. You got to compete. There's billions of websites out there. How do you compete? So I sat down there and I was the first, obviously the first salesperson in the company because you don't have any money at that time and you're just, I got a proof of concept. Proof of concept for a SaaS solution is $1 million a year in business. How do I get there? And I had at the time I had about 2,000 followers on LinkedIn or connections I had on LinkedIn. And I personally emailed every one of them. Like I worked all day long. I got home, had dinner with the family, sat down in my basement and started emailing. I wouldn't leave until I emailed at least 100 people a night, just saying, hey, I've got this new solution. Would love you to test it out. Give me your feedback, start that initial process. And, you just gotta, I don't want to say will it into existence, but you got to really work hard in the very beginning because there's that old saying that first million is the hardest to make. And that's so true because you're trying to put, once you get $1 million in business under you, you've got clients, you've got testimonies, you've got social proof that you can take to the next group of clients and grow to the next level. That's all available, but it's not available on day one when you're trying to get that first client. Their first question is, do you have any case studies? Can I don't know who you are. Can I talk to one of your clients? And you're like, no, I don't have any.
Right.
Can't do that. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So that's the hardest part. And you just got to really work through that. And just know that you're doing the right thing. You got to believe in the product. You got to know you have a good product. Do some market fit analysis to make sure that you're solving the problem, and then you got to go get somebody to believe enough in you to give you some money. And you just got to. It's just hours. You got to put the hours in.
Yeah. Put the reps in. And it sounds like relationships are kind of what you were building in the beginning. Because I see so many business owners when they come to us, I'm like, well, where are you spending your time? Sales are down. Where are you spending your time? And they're doing TikTok videos and dabbling on their website and fixing this word and that word. And I'm like, you should be out having a coffee because someone can say yes right now versus whenever or if they ever find your website or that video, they might say yes then. So you're kind of going back to the old school of doing the grind, reaching out, personal conversations. Did you do that with most of your businesses?
In fact, every one of them. We've always done trade shows where you're face to face with people. You put the computer aside and you're having conversations. And it's a perfect example. We're in a process again. We're changing well, not changing, but we're going after a different ICP, a different, um, type of client that we're going after because brands care most about this product because they're the ones spending the money for the traffic. So I love it when I get a brand and, oh, we're spending $1 million a month. And I'm like, well, on average, we find 25% of fraud, which means $250,000 a month is being supporting fraud. And then they always ask the question, well, where does fraud come from? I'm like, well, over the years, it comes from all over the place, but one of the big places it comes from is organized crime. So if you really put a stretch together, you're giving organized crime 250 grand a month. You want to keep doing that? And that becomes that we got to talk. Like you have those conversations, but so we're going after a different ICP at this point because as we're growing as a company, we have to expand our the relationships that we're going after, the size of the companies that we're going after. So we started hitting a different sector of trade shows. Like this year, we'll do 17 trade shows. Probably 10 or more of them are trade shows we've never done before. So we have no relationship there. So this year we just hit two more trade shows that we were at last year. And all of a sudden we're running into the same people because they stay at the same trade show. And they're like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, we talked last year. We never did that, traffic quality audit. We need to do that because now they're seeing you, they're building up trust, maybe having a drink, maybe having a cup of coffee or a dinner, depending on where it makes sense. And you just have to build that trust in a relationship. And that happens over time. It's not something you're going to generate over a quick TikTok video.
With the digital experience that you've had and that you know how it works behind the scenes, what would you say is a good percentage that business owners should spend on digital versus what you're doing, relationships? Just, I know it's subjective, but
It's like if you can, or so here's the thing, if you're doing digital and it's driving in new business, what you want to do is look at your ROAS, right? For all you got, that's just return on ad spend. So if I spend $1 on Google, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, and I can generate three, four, five, six, $7 in new revenue. If you can get your ads to do that, sink all the money you can into that, right? Because it's a winning ad. As long as as you scale that, those numbers continue to hold or get better, if anything. Um, in addition to that, I am a big believer in the face-to-face trade shows, and you got to decide like how many trade shows your team can handle. If it's just you, how many you want to handle, because you want to prepare for the show, you want to reach out to people ahead of time, book some appointments, you want to get to the show, you want to pretty much you're up at 6, you're in bed by 1 a.m. Like it's work. And it's all about, and you're on 24/7 at these shows. And the show's usually 3 or 4 days long. So how many shows do you want to do a month? How many shows do you want to do a week? Like I know some people that do 50 trade shows a year. I'm like, I don't know how you do it. I mean, I'm tired after, last year I did, I think, 16 trade shows. I mean, I was exhausted.
that
But
that's that's a lot of
I
work.
still believe it's you want to do both. And the spend is going to come down to what's working for you. Because in the beginning, when you don't have a lot of money, every dollar is precious. Every dollar you spend, you want to spend it in an area that's going to produce some revenue. So if you get some really good hits, some good ads that are producing a good ROAS, you want to milk that as much as you can because that's the fastest way to get there. The trade shows do take time, but it's the long game. If you're going to be here long term, you want to be doing those trade shows now so that by the time you see them year 2, year 3, relationships are there. You start to bring in those new contracts.
That's great advice. Is there anything specifically? I know I've been on other podcasts and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have said this or captured that more. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you really want to share with our audience?
So here's a piece of advice to help reduce fraud on Google, at least on Google. You can't do this if you're growing your campaign. Like if you're going after a specific audience and you're trying to get the largest audience possible, this isn't going to work. But in the beginning, when every dollar is precious and you're trying to spend it, when you set up your Google campaign, along those check boxes, there's one that says include partner networks. Uncheck that because that means you only want to buy traffic from google.com. Right? Google.com obviously has no reason to commit fraud on the site. It has the very, very minimalist amount of fraud you can have. But again, it's good if your budget's small. Once your budget starts to get to a certain level, that technique won't work anymore. You're going to need to use a solution like Anura to help you mitigate and reduce fraud while you're getting the broader audience.
I love that. What's the best way to follow you, like you, learn more about you?
Since I am a big believer in business relationships, LinkedIn is my social media of choice. Easy to find, Rich Kahn. Um, Easy to find there. Or just go to Anura.io. Everything we have is listed there. What's nice about Anura.io is we have a tremendous amount of blogs, ebooks. We have the only comprehensive guide to ad fraud that I've seen out there. It's like an 80-page document. Um, and if you're spending some money and you think you have some fraud problems, just sign up for our traffic quality audit. We'll help you understand exactly what's going on, where it's coming from, and how we can help.
That reminds me of a question I meant to ask earlier. What is it like to work with a company like yours? Is it like a retainer each month and you just monitor the website every minute, every day, or is it where you do this analysis once a month? How does that work?
So it's a retainer based, it's a SaaS based solution, right? So there's a retainer based on the amount of visitors that we're scanning. So the more visitors you scan, the cheaper per scan it gets. So it scales nicely. Um, but essentially what we're doing is we're scanning your stuff in real time, keeping tabs on all that information. But then we also allow real time actions. So we have a product called Search and Social Protect that runs in real time. And over the first 90 days that we're running it, we reduced your fraud in half. That's pretty much how it works. Sometimes sooner, sometimes a little bit longer, but that's about how it works. Um, but yeah, so we can also do real-time blocking. So like, let's say if I know that this person that's on your site right now is about to charge a credit card and I can guarantee you that they're fraud, do you want to take their credit card? Probably not. We can block the credit card from being entered at that point. So depending on what our clients want, like we always tell clients, okay, I can tell you very quickly in real time if they're real or not. What do you want to do with them once you know they're not? And then clients do different things. Don't fill out my form. Don't flood my CRM. Don't let them charge a credit card. Don't let them log into my system. We were working with ADT. They were basically having people logging in, hacking people's user accounts and then changing where the direct deposit went.
Mm.
But we can identify that before they even log into the system. So we can help situations like that.
So you just catch them, and then it's up to the user to decide what to do with
They
that.
make the business decision as to what they want to do, and then we can help them, customize the code to do that for them. So this
Very
way,
cool. Very
all they got to do
cool.
is deploy code and everything's hands off.
I encourage our listeners to go check it out. I always end with one last question. If you're in front of an audience of business owners, different industries, different sizes, what's one last bit of applicable advice? It could be a quote, it could be a book, it could be just something you've learned that you'd like to share with all of them.
One of my favorite books is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I mean, you can't go wrong with that book. And unfortunately, like I talk to a lot of people. Yep, there you
I
go.
carry it with me everywhere in my briefcase.
It's a great book. And it really it teaches you how to talk to people and get people to like you. And just be more effective and again, this is going to be useful at trade shows. It's going to be useful if, let's face it, most software demos are done over Zoom at this stage or some type of video conferencing. And you want the person on the other end to like you, in salesmanship, sales 101, get them to like you first.
Yeah,
Right? Sell yourself. So that's a great book for that. So if you haven't
absolutely.
read that book, I'd be shocked, but that's the book to read.